When I asked what time my son's wedding would be, my daughter-in-law replied, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." A week later, she called me in a panic. "The rent is overdue. Did you forget to transfer the money?" I simply replied, "Didn't I tell you?" Before we continue, I'd like to ask you to like this video to help it reach more people. Thank you. And now enjoy the story. I had picked up the phone to ask my son what time his wedding was. I had just started to dial Daniel's number when my daughter-in-law Victoria looked me straight in the eye and with an icy smile said, "We got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words washed over me like a bucket of cold water. Special people. Me, who for 3 years had been paying their rent every month without fail, $3,000 a month. Me, who had bought every chair and nightstand in their apartment. Me, who had stocked their refrigerator when they were short on cash. I was not special. I stood in my own living room, holding the phone as if it weighed a ton. I didn't hide my gaze. And Victoria, as if nothing had happened, made herself more comfortable on the sofa, a piece of furniture from the very collection that had appeared in their home thanks to my money. In my closet hung a rose-colored dress that I had chosen for my son's wedding, carefully covered in plastic. Next to it, a box with new shoes. And my long-held quiet dream of being there on the most important day of my only child's life. I had spent $500 on that dress. I had imagined how respectable I would look in the photos with Daniel, the same photos in which, as it turned out, I was never meant to be. I had already set aside another $2,000 for a wedding gift. I had called my sister in Florida to share my joy. I had cleaned my entire apartment until it sparkled, because I had hoped that after the ceremony, they would come to my place to celebrate as a family. And all of it in an instant was shattered by 4 words. Only for special people. Daniel finally looked up. His voice was rehearsed, dry. "Mom, it was a very intimate ceremony. There were very few of us, just us and the witnesses." I nodded, though I had already seen it on my phone on social media. Her parents standing next to the newlyweds smiling. Victoria's brothers raising their glasses. Her in a white dress, for which, by the way, I had given her an extra $500 last month for little things. I had seen everything I wasn't invited to. Exactly 1 week later, to the day after that humiliation, Victoria called with a completely different voice. Not the confident mistress of her life, but like a person on the edge of a cliff. "Eleanor," she said, her voice rushed, even trembling. "The rent is due. The landlord is pressuring us. He said if we don't pay by the end of the week, he'll evict us. You must have forgotten to make the transfer." I was silent, listening to her breathing and remembering how many times I had rushed to the bank, canceling my own plans, just so they would have a roof over their heads. How many times I had lived on oatmeal and potatoes so that they would have something delicious in their refrigerator. And now, after they had erased me from their most important day, she was talking as if nothing had happened. "Victoria," I said calmly, surprised at my own evenness, "it seems I forgot to tell you. I only help special people." A silence hung on the other end of the line, so profound that I could hear my own heart beating in my chest, steady, confident, without the old familiar tremor. For the first time in many years, it wasn't me who was trembling. It was her. "Eleanor, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mother to me." The sweet voice she always turned on when she needed something. The same voice that had asked me for money for the dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings, for everything I had paid for, without even knowing that I wouldn't be at the ceremony. For so many years I had tiptoed around, choosing my words, my gifts, my gestures, hoping to beg for a crumb of warmth from my own son. I was the convenient mother-in-law, the silent wallet that no one notices as long as it's open. But the phrase "only for special people" had awakened something in me that had been dormant for too long. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't explain anything further. I just repeated evenly and clearly so she would be sure to hear. "I only help special people." I ended the call and placed the phone on the table where I had so many times laid out money for them in envelopes, where I had cried quietly so no one would see. The room became so quiet you could hear the clock on the wall ticking, and I suddenly thought, from now on, everything will be different. That night I cried. Not from sadness but from anger. From the dull ache of resentment I had swallowed in silence for years, while I was being taught to tiptoe and guess other people's desires, just so I wouldn't be superfluous to my own son. And in the morning I woke up a different woman. As if a switch had been flipped inside me. I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. The same tired eyes, the same wrinkles that held my whole life, but in my gaze there was a new hardness, a calm resolve that hadn't been there before. I made coffee as always, only this time I didn't reach for the phone. I wasn't waiting for any apologies, any mom. You have to understand. For the first time in a long time, my first concern was myself. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where I had so many times laid out there, just until the next paycheck and for the holidays, and I took out my bank statements, a checkbook, and a line sheet of paper. And I began to count without sentiment just the numbers. Rent. $3,000 a month for 36 months. That came out to $108,000. Groceries about $1,000 a month, another $36,000. Gifts for various occasions at least $20,000. Victoria's emergency dental work $2,000. The loan on their car, which they were about to pay off and never did, $6,000. Their air conditioner repair $1,500. The living room set, that very sofa and table, $3,000. In total about $176,500. All of it, this mountain of money from my pension, from my and Robert's nest egg for a quiet old age, from the savings I had scraped together penny by penny. For what? For the comfort of two adults who couldn't even be bothered to pretend that my life mattered to them. Only my bank transfers. The phone rang. Daniel. Before I would have jumped, snatched the receiver, my heart pounding. Please say, Mom, I'm sorry. Say it was all a misunderstanding. But I just let it ring. A second time, too. I read the message. Mom, we need to talk urgently. And deleted it like you delete junk mail. 10 minutes later, Victoria. The same dull ring, the same calm refusal to answer. I finished my coffee and went out. Just to walk, without any errands or other people's shopping lists. In the park where I used to push Daniel on the swings, I remembered a warm little boy who would hug me so tightly it felt like no trouble could ever touch us. And I asked myself, at what point did he turn into a man for whom I was just an ATM with feelings? When did I myself decide that love had to be bought, and if you stopped paying you would stop being loved? I stopped in front of the bank. The manager, our local branch manager, Mr. Peterson, saw me through the glass and waved. For 3 years he had processed my transfers, watching my account shrink month by month for the sake of other people's desires. Mr. Peterson, I said as I sat down across from him, I'd like to cancel all the automatic payments I have set up for them, and tell me, how can I protect my accounts? No one needs access anymore. He was surprised. For 3 years it had worked like clockwork. Then he grew serious. Mrs. Vance, are you sure? Has something happened? Something has happened, I replied. I've opened my eyes. While he was processing the cancellation, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Daniel, Victoria, Daniel again. As if they had a radar that detected the tap being turned off. I turned it off completely. Mr. Peterson handed me the papers, holding my hand for a moment. Forgive me for interfering. You've been very generous with your family. I hope you're not being pressured into this decision. You know, in that moment, his sincerity was more than I had received from my entire family in recent memory. I smiled for the first time easily. No one is pressuring me. I've stopped pressuring myself. When I left the branch, it felt as though I had taken off a heavy coat, the kind you don't even notice you're wearing until you've thrown it off. For the first time in many years, my money was truly my own. I walked home and thought about what I had given up for them, the trips I had postponed for later, the friends I had stopped seeing because the children urgently needed something, the small joys I had considered extra. And the closer I got to my building, the calmer I became, as if I were returning to myself, not just to my apartment. And at the gate stood 3 cars. Daniel's, Victoria's, and another unfamiliar one. There was movement in the windows. They had keys. I had given them a set. Just in case, I had thought. In case I need help. In case they ever want to take care of me. I took a deep breath, took the bag off my shoulder, and gripped the doorknob. It was time to face the first real clash of my new life. I opened the door, and it was a scene from a stranger's house. Daniel was sitting on my sofa, his head down. Victoria was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. And an unfamiliar man of about 50 in a gray suit was arranging my papers on my table, looking them over calmly as if browsing in a store. I stopped in the doorway, put my bag on the console table and asked without shouting, but so that everyone would understand who was the mistress here. "What is going on here?" They jumped as if caught red-handed. Victoria was the first to speak. Her voice was syrupy, rushed. "Eleanor, thank goodness you're here. We really need to talk. This is Mr. David Adler, a family lawyer. We were consulting him about your situation." "My situation?" I repeated. "And what situation might that be, when I am healthy and of sound mind? But I see you have a situation. You are in my house without me, and you are rummaging through my papers." The man took a step forward, extending his hand. A professional smile. "Good day, Mrs. Vance. Your children are concerned about your well-being. They've noticed some eccentricities in your behavior. And so as not to offend anyone, we would suggest drawing up a power of attorney. Temporary, of course, so that Daniel and his wife can help you manage your finances while you—" Well, I didn't shake his hand. I walked to the table and neatly, without rushing, gathered all the documents into a pile. "These are my personal papers. You are not to look at them without my permission," I said. "I gave you the keys for an emergency, not for a search." "Mom!" Daniel raised his head. His tone was condescending, like a doctor with a capricious patient. "We're worried. You turned off the automatic payments, you stopped answering your phone. You're behaving illogically. Maybe you need help." Victoria immediately moved closer, trying to take my hand very gently, as she knows how when she needs something. "Eleanor, don't be offended. We're family. At your age, everyone has some confusion, stress, blood pressure." "I have no confusion," I replied evenly. "I have order and a clear head for the first time in a long time." The lawyer, without losing his smile, took a folder out of his briefcase and placed it on the table. "This is all very simple. A power of attorney. And next to it, a package of documents that will help if the court should find that you require guardianship. It's temporary. You'll rest. We'll take the entire burden off your shoulders." I took the folder and, without any drama, dropped it into the paper wastebasket. "The only burden I'm taking off myself is you," I said calmly. "No powers of attorney. And certainly no talk of guardianship. I've been responsible for myself for over 30 years, and I'm doing better now than when you were on my back." Victoria flinched. Her eyes immediately turned cold. "You can't do this to us. We were counting on it. We have obligations, loans, rent. And in the end, all of this will be ours sooner or later anyway. We're just speeding up the process." That's when something inside me, somewhere under my ribs, clicked like a switch. I pointed to the door. "All three of you out of my house." Daniel jumped up, his lips pouting like a child's. "Mom, we're not leaving just like that. You can't just cut everything off in a day. You have to be reasonable." "Reasonable? How?" I asked. "To pay for the lives of two adults who couldn't find a place for their own mother at their own wedding? No, Daniel. I will be reasonable for myself." The lawyer didn't give up. His voice was businesslike, confident. "Mrs. Vance, even if you are upset right now, you must understand that the family has legal tools. If relatives see a threat, the court can appoint a guardian for you. This is standard practice. Nothing to be afraid of." "Afraid? No. Ashamed?" "Yes," I replied. "To try to have a living, sane person declared incompetent for access to her money. That is shameful." Victoria burst into tears. Loud, well-timed, like in a movie. "You're not listening to us. We just want to help. And you're making everything complicated. You're like a mother to me." I was like a mother to you when you were going to the courthouse, I said. But you chose only special people. The lawyer began to put his papers back, but before leaving, already in the hallway, he said in his even tone, "This is not the end, Mrs. Vance. Your children have options. We will return to this conversation in a legal context." "Wonderful," I nodded. "At your own expense." They moved towards the door. On the threshold, Victoria threw over her shoulder without the tears. "This isn't over. We have rights too. And lawyers." "Use them," I replied. "Just not with my money." Daniel lingered for half a step, looking somewhere past me. "Mom, you'll end up all alone. And when you really need help, there will be no one there." "I am already alone, Daniel," I said quietly but firmly. "The difference is that now it's by my choice, not yours." The door closed, and the apartment became so quiet that you could hear the thud of their package of documents in the wastebasket. But in my ears, like a whisper left behind, it still rang. This isn't over. That night, as much as I tried to sleep, I only tossed and turned, listening to the silence and remembering how they had stood at my door with a strange lawyer. And by morning, I felt as if I had frozen inside. Not icy, no, just calm, like the water in a glass when it's no longer shaken. I got dressed in a businesslike manner, and by 9, I was at a lawyer's office with Andrew Solomon. He had been recommended to me once for inheritance matters, a smart man without any pretense. I told him everything in order, without tears or complaints, just the facts. The wedding for special people, the money over 3 years, the visit with the pressure for a power of attorney. "This is a classic scheme," he said, looking over my statements and checks. "Financial abuse of the elderly, an attempt to gain control through guardianship under the guise of care. They entered your home without you. That's already an invasion. We'll act immediately. We'll document all the transfers, revoke all access, change the locks, install cameras, and notify the local police precinct. And we'll also change your will and open a new account at a different bank. Document every call, every attempt at pressure." For 3 hours we sat over the papers. And every time he put another gift or urgent request in a separate folder, he would whistle under his breath. Over 100,000 in 3 years. Can you imagine? I left his office with a plan, like a roadmap, step by step, without any hysterics. My first stop was the hardware store. The owner, a man named Walter, knew me. I had run in more than once for some hardware when the kids had urgently broken something. This time I said simply, "Walter, I need all my locks changed, and let's not skimp. And I need good cameras." He raised his eyebrows but didn't ask any questions. His son, or rather the young man who installs their security systems, happened to come in. His name was Kevin. We arranged for him to come in the morning, 8 a.m. They would come and install everything. At the store, an unfamiliar number rang. I answered mechanically, and of course it was Victoria, sweet soft. "Eleanor, please don't hang up. Let's be reasonable. We want to make it up to you. We'll have a dinner just for you. Everything as it should be at your place. We'll cook together like we used to. How much do you owe in rent?" I asked so simply that I even liked it myself. A pause hung in the air, then, 2 months. 6,000. "But that's not what I'm talking about, honestly. We miss you. We need you." "You miss my money, Victoria," I said without anger. "If you needed me, why wasn't I at your wedding? Why did you only find me when you were in trouble?" She said something more about love, and we're family. And I said goodbye and hung up. I wanted to do something simple, ordinary for myself. I went to see Bella, my hairdresser, whom I hadn't seen in a year. I had always canceled because of the children's urgent matters. "Eleanor," Bella exclaimed, "where have you been? Sit down, let's make you beautiful." I sat under her hands, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't mentally calculating who I owed what and when to transfer it. When she finished, she said, looking in the mirror, "You look so much brighter. Has something good happened?" "I've learned to say no," I replied and smiled at myself, not at the new haircut, but at the woman in the mirror who had finally stepped out of the shadows. Returning, I saw an unfamiliar woman with a travel mug sitting by my building's entrance. She stood up to meet me. Eleanor? Forgive me, I'm Margaret, your neighbor from across the way. I heard some shouting at your place yesterday. I was worried. Is everything all right? She asked with such concern that I invited her up for tea. And as the kettle was boiling, I told her everything as if in confession. She listened attentively without any, but maybe you yourself. Just nodding. You did the right thing, she said when I finished. My daughter did the same thing to me 5 years ago. Until she realized that you can't buy love, not even at a discount. We cut off the money, things got worse. Then they got better. Sometimes she calls for real, not out of need. Maybe it will be the same for you. Or maybe not. But that's no longer your responsibility. We finished our tea, she left, and I suddenly felt the courtyard become quieter. And in that quiet I was calm. The next morning Walter and Kevin arrived on the dot, changed the locks, drilled, pulled cables. My phone was still on silent. Unfamiliar numbers came one after another, like raindrops on a window pane, and I watched indifferently as they pleaded and faded. When the guys left, I sat in the kitchen and called my sister Diana in Florida. We had been talking less and less lately, because I, like a fool, had been reporting to her not about my life, but about other people's expenses. Diana, I said, I think I've finally woken up. I told her everything without holding back. She listened, sighed, and then told me a truth that stung but made things easier. Ellie, I've wanted to tell you so many times, you don't have to buy love. He talked about you like a service. Mom paid. Mom bought. Never mom is needed. I love mom. And Victoria would talk in the future tense. When Eleanor is gone. The words cut like paper, but it was an honest cut. The kind that heals faster. We stayed on the line a little longer talking about the sea, about the weather. And when I hung up, I thought that you can live without a constant mom urgently. Even easier. In the evening I was tired, not physically, but the way you get tired after a big resolved issue. I went to bed early, and it seems for the first time in many months I fell into a real sleep. In the morning, as always, I made coffee, watered the flowers, took a cloth and wiped the new plates on the doors. And at that moment the doorbell rang, short, businesslike. I looked through the peephole. On the landing stood a young woman with a folder, neat, official. Good day, Mrs. Vance, she said when I opened the door slightly. I'm Rachel from Social Services. We've received a report that you may be in need of a welfare check. May I come in? I asked for her ID. She immediately produced a batch. Everything as it should be. A calm voice, a neat folder. I'm from Social Services, Rachel said. We received a report that there have been abrupt changes in your behavior. You've stopped communicating with your family, you've canceled money transfers, you've installed security cameras. We'd like to make sure that you're all right. I am perfectly fine, I replied. But I will only speak in the presence of my lawyer. It's not a whim, it's experience. She tried to smile in a way that would soften me. This isn't an interrogation, Mrs. Vance. It's just a welfare check. If you have nothing to hide. I had heard the phrase, if you have nothing to hide, too often in the past few weeks. I called Andrew Solomon. He arrived in 20 minutes. Composed, without any unnecessary words, he greeted us, asked Rachel for her documents again, and sat down next to me like a wall. Colleague, he said evenly, I'm informing you that there have been attempts at pressure on my client from her relatives with the aim of gaining control over her funds, invasion of her home, imposition of a power of attorney, conversations about establishing guardianship. Here are the statements, the receipts, a list of transfers over 3 years. He laid out folder after folder on the table. The sum is significant, and there's been zero reciprocity. We ask that this be documented as well. Rachel leafed through the papers silently, without any resistance. It was clear that the picture in her head did not match what was lying on her lap. Then she turned to me, now as a human being. Mrs. Vance, do you manage your own finances? I do. I can show you my current bills, taxes, utilities. Everything is paid. There are no debts. You live alone but independently? Yes. I cook, I clean, I drive, I go to the doctor on a schedule. My medications are just vitamins and blood pressure pills as prescribed by my therapist. I don't buy or hoard anything unnecessary. Why did you install the cameras and locks? For my own safety. The children had keys. They would come in unannounced. Not anymore. Andrew nodded briefly. We've notified the local precinct. A statement has been prepared to prevent unlawful actions. Any further harassment will go through me. Rachel sighed a weary womanly sigh. I understand. I see no grounds for our intervention. I will close the check. If anyone else contacts us on your behalf, we will contact you or your representative first. She left, and Andrew and I sat in the kitchen for a while longer, finishing our cold tea without rushing. He looked at me attentively. They won't stop. When you cut off access to easy money, they always try a new approach. Be prepared and hold the line. I am, I said, and for the first time I believed it myself. After he left, I called Diana and told her how everything had gone, without turning it into a victory march. Just a day in which I didn't back down. Ellie, she said with that warmth that always makes me stand a little taller. You know what's the most powerful thing in your story? Not their audacity. Your composure. You've become stronger than you were. Those words were more needed than any hang-in there. In the evening, Margaret dropped by with a bottle of dry wine, smiling. We're celebrating. Small victories need to be celebrated too. Otherwise the big ones don't come. We sat in my kitchen talking about cucumbers and life, about how easy it is to confuse help with substitution, and where a mother's love ends and simple dependency begins. I caught myself thinking that I was happy just like that, without waiting for a mom, urgently call, without the inner anxiety of how to please everyone. Do you think I'll ever stop missing the little boy Daniel was? I asked her as she was leaving. Probably not, she answered honestly. But you'll stop letting that longing keep you chained to the adult Daniel. I fell asleep quickly, as if someone had turned off a long-standing hum in the room. The morning was ordinary. Coffee, flowers on the windowsill, a short walk around the block. I was coming back, turning the key in the lock, and then a call, insistent like from people who are not used to waiting. I looked through the peephole. On the landing, a man in his 50s in a strict suit and a young woman with a tablet. The man smiled into the peephole as if he had known me for years and showed an ID. Good day. Dr. Victor Jensen, geriatric psychiatrist, and this is my assistant, Anna. We've been asked to conduct a small assessment of your condition. And I knew the next round had begun. I didn't open the door wide, just enough on the chain to see their faces, and I said evenly without any irritation as to a person at the door. Doctor, there will be no assessment in my home. I have refused and I will refuse again. You are on private property. You cannot enter without my consent. The young woman with the tablet smiled like a teacher. Mrs. Vance, this is for your own good. Just a 10-minute conversation. We'll confirm that you're fine, and your loved ones will be at ease. My loved ones are at ease when they have access to my bank card, I replied. Now they are anxious because the access is closed. This Jensen, kept his polite mask on, but his voice now had a steel in it. A refusal to be interviewed is also documented and interpreted. You understand, your son is very worried. He reported abrupt changes. You are isolating yourself, you've stopped transferring money, the cameras, the locks. The cameras and locks are fine, I said. And now, excuse me, I'm going to call my lawyer. I called Andrew Solomon. He arrived quickly, as he had promised he always would in such cases. He greeted us, asked the assistant for her documents, checked the seals, and very calmly, without any pressure, but in such a way that everything became clear, he said, Doctor, you have been invited by persons against whom my client has filed statements of unlawful actions. Any attempts at assessment without consent constitute pressure through third parties. On good terms, you leave now. On bad terms, I call the police and document the violation. We are representatives of medicine, Jensen insisted. Not relatives. Representatives of those who are forbidden to approach, Andrew specified dryly. This is called harassment by proxy. I nodded and called the police. They arrived quickly, 2 of them. Sergeant Miller already knew me because the local precinct was aware of the whole story. They asked for documents, politely but insistently asked them to leave the landing. As she was leaving, the assistant threw over her shoulder without dropping her smile. "Don't let them isolate you from those who love you." "Those who love me don't try to have me declared insane," I replied. And the door closed behind them. Andrew and I went to the kitchen. I poured tea. He laid out his folders neatly like a surgeon's instruments. "They'll keep pushing," he said. "The next step is usually guardianship. They file a petition to have you declared incompetent, attach statements from acquaintances, papers from doctors, any ridiculous observation reports." "What do we do?" I asked without any fuss. "Document everything that has been and will be." He listed on his fingers. "Written explanations from people who see you every day. Financial statements. An independent examination with Dr. Monroe. She's a specialist in cognitive assessment. Plus, we'll refute their witnesses. The pharmacist, the neighbor." "Let's go." We went to the pharmacy first. Alex Chun, our pharmacist, was embarrassed when he saw me with the lawyer, turned red, and started making excuses even before the questions. "Mrs. Vance, your daughter-in-law came to me. She said she was worried, asked what medications you were on. I told her you take vitamins and sometimes painkillers, that you don't have any regular prescriptions. And she turned it into she's not getting treatment, so she's not competent." Andrew finished for him. "Did you sign anything?" "She gave me some paper. I thought it was for insurance." Chun looked down guiltily. "It said my purchases were irregular." "Now you'll write a proper statement," Andrew said. "That there are no standing prescriptions due to a lack of indications, that the irregularity is due to a lack of need, not a violation of a regimen. And attach copies of the receipts." "Can you do that?" "Of course." He nodded frequently. "I didn't mean you any harm." We picked up the statement in the evening with a seal and dates. After the pharmacy, we went to see the neighbor across the street, George. He looked out from behind his door chain, displeased, as if we had just blown a fuse. "What do you want?" he grumbled. "To clarify why you signed a paper saying I was behaving strangely," I said calmly. "What exactly was strange?" "You put up cameras like in a war zone," he grimaced. "One minute you have a crowd of people over. The next you're shouting at your relatives in the hallway. The cameras are to protect me from unannounced visits," I explained. "The crowd are my friends. And the shouting was me defending my home from those who came with a lawyer." "How should I know?" he shrugged. "I signed what I saw. I like order." Talking to him was like talking to a brick wall. Not malicious but deaf. Andrew just noted the date, the time, and his phrase, "I signed what I saw." In the car on the way home, Andrew summed it up. "We won't convince the neighbor, and we don't need to. His testimony is empty." Heard saw. But the pharmacy? That's serious. And social services closed their investigation. That's another plus. I've scheduled you with Dr. Monroe for the day after tomorrow. Be prepared. Passport statements, bills, any notes. She'll give an objective assessment, and then it will be easier for us in court. "So it will go to court?" I asked and was surprised at how calm I sounded. "They'll try," he nodded. "Then it depends on how far they're willing to go for your money." That evening I called Diana, just to hear a living voice that wished me well, not profit. I told her about the doctor, the pharmacy, the neighbor. "Ellie," she said, with that warmth that always makes me stand a little taller, "you're handling this right. And if it goes to court, it's not about shame, it's about boundaries. You didn't push them to this. They got there themselves." I slept surprisingly well. The morning was ordinary. Coffee, flowers, the window ajar, the air cool. And then a call, not to the door but to my personal phone, from Andrew. His voice was short, businesslike, without any extra words. "Mrs. Vance, be prepared. They have filed a petition with the court to have you declared incompetent and to establish guardianship." I didn't panic, didn't argue with the phone. I just placed it next to me, opened the window and let the air cool my thoughts. If they filed, Then we'll just have to keep working without hysterics step by step. Andrew immediately sent the address and time for my appointment with Dr. Monroe. An independent cognitive assessment, without any tricks or well-wishers. I gathered everything he had asked for. My passport, statements, tax receipts, payment schedules, even the notebook where I list what and when to pay so I don't miss anything. Dr. Eleanor Monroe turned out to be a woman in her 50s, attentive but not coddling. She seated me comfortably, placed a glass of water in front of me, and warned me that the questions would be varied. About memory, about daily independence, about finances, about logic. Answer as it is, she said. I don't need right answers. I need you. We talked for 2 hours. She asked me to name dates, to reconstruct sequences, to solve simple math problems, to explain how I manage my money and what I look for in bank statements. She showed me funny pictures where I had to find what didn't belong, and she asked me to briefly summarize a long text, and then to recall it again 10 minutes later. I didn't rush, I didn't hurry. I answered as adults do, calmly and to the point. At the end, she reviewed her notes for a long time, looked up and smiled, not a professional smile but a human one. Mrs. Vance, your results are excellent for your age, even above average. Your memory, attention, financial literacy, it's all there. I'll prepare the report by this evening. I went out to Andrew in the corridor. He was on the phone, dictating article numbers to someone. He saw me and nodded. And from his look, I knew that everything was going as it should. We went to my place to finish some applications, to organize the folders so we wouldn't be fumbling in court. In the kitchen, among the familiar cups and jars of grains, the papers looked especially businesslike. Neat stacks, tabs, sticky notes where I had marked in large letters what was where so I wouldn't get confused. In the evening, Margaret dropped by, as if she could sense when I needed live support. She brought a pie and said without any preamble, "The girls and I will be your witnesses. We see you every day, we see how you live, how you reason. We have something to say." An hour later, the girls arrived. Bella, Maria, Karina, Hope, my new gardening club, as we joked. We sat at the table and each in her own way told me her story, so I would have no illusions that I was the only one. One's brother had been draining money for his business for years. Another's daughter only remembered her mother when deadlines were looming. Another's grandchildren were already dividing up the inheritance. I listened, and in a strange mixture of bitterness and relief, I understood that this was not our family's shame. It was a disease of relationships when love is replaced by a ledger. "We'll go with you," said Hope, the eldest, in a voice that held not a drop of pity, only firmness. "And we'll say what we've seen without embellishment, without anger. Let the court see a living person, not their horror stories." Diana called evenly, without any lamentations. I told her about the examination, about the witnesses, about how Andrew had laid everything out step by step. She listened and said a phrase that seemed to prop up my heart. "Ellie, you've stopped making excuses. It's immediately noticeable. And even if they go all the way, you're not coming from a corner, but moving forward on your own 2 feet. Like an adult." After the call, I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time. I didn't cry out loud, no. I just silently let go of what I had clung to for years. The picture of the obedient little boy from childhood. The illusion that if you try harder, you will surely be loved. It was bitter but clean. Like when a doctor cleans a wound and at first it stings and then it's easier to breathe. I allowed myself this silence. Not self-pity, but a farewell to a dream that had not come true. That night I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from that collectedness when your brain lays everything out on its shelves. What to wear, which folders on top, who to call in case of a delay, when to leave to avoid traffic. I walked through the apartment, my gaze stroking the new door plates. I checked that everything was locked. I put my passport and papers in a visible place, a separate flash drive with copies. Then I returned to the window, pushed back the curtain. The courtyard was quiet. The streetlights were golden spots. And I suddenly realized that I hadn't felt so adult in a long time. Truly adult without any buts or ifs. In the morning, Andrew and I met as usual at the entrance. He always arrives 10 minutes before the scheduled time. He was wearing a strict suit, carrying a briefcase with his files, and on his face was that calm that you can't buy. We went over the order one more time. First their witnesses, then ours. Dr. Monroe in the middle. Me towards the end so the judge would have a fresh look at me, not on paper but in person. If they start playing on pity, don't get hooked, he reminded me gently. Speak evenly with facts. You're not accusing anyone. You're defending your boundaries. That's all. I nodded. My hands weren't shaking, and that surprised me a little. I took my bag, checked my phone, and moved my keys to my right pocket. A small thing that gives a sense of control. We had just stepped outside when a message from an unknown number flashed on the screen. Short, without a greeting, without a signature. Think about the future before it's too late. I didn't answer. I turned the phone face down and took a deeper breath. Andrew's car was parked right at the entrance, and we were just getting in when suddenly Victoria's car pulled up into the courtyard, right up to our porch, slowly, demonstratively. She got out first, in black, as if for a funeral. Behind her, Daniel in a new suit, with a familiar stubbornness on his face. And their lawyer Adler with a folder under his arm and that same even smile I would never forget. They stopped 3 steps away from us. Victoria looked me straight in the eye and said quietly, "Today, everything will be decided. I hope you're ready." And right then something inside me clicked. Not with fear, no, but with something like a combat silence. I straightened my shoulders, met her gaze, and was just opening my mouth to answer. In the courtroom corridor it was cool, the walls were pale, the people were strangers. And from this I suddenly felt a calm. This wasn't about tears. This was about order. Andrew, next to me, rearranged his folders, looked at his watch, and lightly touched my elbow. "We're ready." And we walked in. The judge, a Mr. Harrison, was businesslike, without any show of severity. The kind of man who is used to listening, not to displaying power. First, their lawyer Adler spoke. With an even intonation, he painted me as a vulnerable elderly woman who had suddenly stopped being herself, had isolated herself, had installed cameras, had fallen under the influence of outsiders. Word by word, and it turned out that my freedom was a symptom. Victoria was called first. She cried beautifully. Her voice broke in all the right places. Eleanor has always been like a mother to me. To see her decline is terrifying. We want to help. Andrew stood up and asked, without any offense, just matter-of-factly, "Can you tell me when was the last time you called my client not about money?" "We? Often." She was suddenly flustered. "I don't remember the exact dates. Is it true that you got married without her participation?" Andrew continued. "And when asked why, you told her it was only for special people? That was taken out of context." She flared up. "What context could that phrase have that would remove the insult?" Andrew didn't raise his voice. There was no answer. Then Daniel. It was the most painful thing to see him under oath. My boy, who had become a man and had chosen not me. He said that Mom had changed, had become suspicious, had stopped transferring money. And when Andrew asked, "How much money did you receive from your mother in the last 3 years?" "I don't remember exactly. About 176,000. Does that sound familiar? And how many times did you visit her just because, without any requests?" Silence. "And one more question. Is it true that you entered her home without permission and offered her a power of attorney to sign over control of her accounts?" We wanted to help. The neighbor confirmed his story. "She put up cameras, people are always coming and going, they were shouting at each other on the landing." Andrew didn't argue, just clarified that the people were friends, the cameras were a security measure after an invasion, and the shouting was an attempt to stop the pressure. Dr. Jensen explained that I had refused an assessment, and therefore there was reason to assume. At this point, Andrew handed the judge Dr. Monroe's report. Detailed, calm, without any raptures, but with numbers and tests. Memory, attention, logic, financial literacy, normal, in some places above average. The judge nodded as he flipped through the pages. This is what medicine looks like when it's about facts. Then our side. Mr. Peterson from the bank confirmed that my instructions regarding my accounts were conscious and correct. The pharmacist, Alex Chan, admitted that he had signed the paper out of a misunderstanding and immediately submitted a statement. I had no regular prescriptions because there were no indications. Margaret and the girls from our gardening club said simple things. They see me every day we talk. I am oriented in dates, I pay my bills, I don't confuse people or events. I can come back from the store without getting lost and with a receipt. I don't lose my watering can in the garden, or my keys from my bag. In the end I was called. I walked to the stand slowly without any theatrics, and placing my hands on the edge, I simply told it as it was. The wedding for special people, the 3 years of transfers, the invasion of my home, the attempt to impose a power of attorney, the calls from social services and a psychiatrist, the cameras and locks because of security, not paranoia. Andrew asked one question, the most important one. Why did you stop the funding? Because I realized I wasn't buying love but a habit, I replied. And a habit is expensive and doesn't return any warmth. Adults should live on their own means, not on a mother's guilt. Adler tried to get a rise out of me. And what if your neighbors and your lawyer are manipulating you? But I just smiled. For the first time in a long time, my words were not excuses but boundaries. The judge retired to deliberate. For 2 hours we sat in the corridor. Dry air, the occasional footsteps, strangers' conversations. I didn't pace, didn't count the minutes. I just sat next to Andrew and thought how strangely fast a person grows up when they stop making excuses. When Harrison returned, you could have heard a pin drop in the courtroom. After reviewing the case materials, he began, the court concludes that there are no grounds for declaring Eleanor Vance incompetent. The independent expert's report meets the requirements. The respondent's financial decisions are logical and consistent. No facts of abuse by third parties have been established. The petitioner's motion is to be denied. He looked up. Additionally, I would like to note that the attempts by close relatives to gain control over property under the guise of care are regarded by the court as pressure. I recommend that the parties refrain from such actions in the future. The courtroom fell so silent it was as if all the noise had been turned off at once. Inside me there was no elation, no revenge, only a steady relief, like when you take off a tight bandage and your skin begins to breathe. Andrew and I walked out into the corridor, and there was Victoria in her black dress with a sharp gaze. This isn't over, she said. We have options. Use them, I replied. On your own dime. Daniel stood next to her looking past me, as if he couldn't find anything to focus on. For a second I thought I saw a flicker of that childish mom in his eyes, but the moment passed, and in its place was resentment against the world. That evening my friends gathered at my place. Margaret, the girls. Bella brought a pie. The laughter was quiet, not celebratory, but the kind that comes after a great tension, when your palms still remember how tightly they were clenched. We toasted with tea to boundaries. No one said any grand words because grand words were not ours. 3 months passed. I sold the house without any drama. I just accepted that large walls require a lot of strength, and I needed my strength for myself now. I moved into a bright 2-bedroom apartment closer to the city center. The market was a step away, the theater 2 blocks, the clinic on the next street. I transferred half the money to foundations that help elderly people in situations similar to mine. The other half I put into a separate account. And for the first time in a long time, that sum didn't feel like someone else's, not someone's plan, but my own reserve of air. I started traveling, not to the dream destinations of Europe as I had once thought, but in my own way. St. Petersburg, the White Nights. Karelia, water and stone. Lake Baikal. A silence so profound it rings in your ears. And you realize that you can be silent and it will be a conversation. I joined a painting class. We laughed, we smeared, we argued about shadows. And it turned out that your hands remember, even if your heart was busy with other people's accounts. On weekends, Margaret and I would volunteer with those who were having a hard time. And there I saw it again. Help is when you are there, not when a decision is made for you. There was no news from Daniel and Victoria. A rumor reached me from a neighbor. They had moved to a smaller place. Victoria had gotten a job. Maybe life would teach them what my generosity had failed to teach them. that you have to pay for your own comfort. And that respect is something that cannot be bought at all. I didn't hold a grudge. Grudges are like a backpack full of bricks. You carry it and it doesn't get any lighter. I just took it off and set it aside. Sometimes in the evenings I go out onto the balcony, lean on the railing, and look at the windows across the way, at the cat walking on the windowsill, at the few stars. And I realize that silence can be of different kinds. Sometimes it's a punishment and sometimes it's an open space. Mine is the latter. I am alone and it's not about being abandoned, it's about having chosen. I have a simple but precise moral, which I whispered to myself late but in time. You can't buy the love of a grown son. You can only offer it and accept a refusal, without paying with yourself. My name is Eleanor, I am 70, and I have finally understood that the most important person I am obliged to love and protect is myself. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. If it resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe, and be sure to write in the comments what you think about it. Your feedback helps to promote such stories and inspires the creation of new ones. Be well, value yourself, and live with dignity.